Srimad Bhagavatam ISKCON DVD founder Acharya say the whole world should Prabhupada Jai Nitya Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivra Jakacharya Ashko Parashata Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki, Nama Chagra Sharnas Thakur Ki, Prem Zagaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Sadigaur Bhaktivinoda Ki, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki, Braj Bhumi Shivindavadam Ki, Navdip Mayapur Dama Ki, Purushtam Chatra Jagalpuri Dama Ki, Ganga Mai Ki, Jamuna Mai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Tulasi Maharani Ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki, Jainitai Gaur Premanandi, all glories to somebodies, all glories to somebodies, all glories to somebodies, all glories, let us be the Shri Gavan, Shri Gavan, all glories to Sri Prabhupada Ki. Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Guru Krishna, Nirvishesha, Shastra Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tadasha Tatra Akila Satpatam Patim Tadasha Tatra Kila Satpatam Patim Tadasha Tatra Kila Satpatam Patim Shriya Patim Yagya Patim Jagat Patim Shriya Patim Yagya Patim Jagat Patim Shriya Patim Yagya Patim Jagat Patim Tadasha Tatra Kila Satpatam Patim Shriya Patim Yagya Patim Jagat Patim Sunanda Nanda Prabhala Ahara Adibi Sunanda Nanda Prabhala Ahara Adibi Sunanda Nanda Prabhala Ahara Adibi Sva Pashadagrai Parisevitam Vibhum Svapashadagrai Parisevitam Vibhum Sapashadagrai Parisevitam Vibhum Sunandananda Prabhala Divi Sapashadagrai Parisevitam Vibhum Dadasha Tatra Kila Satpatam Patim Shriya Patim Yagya Patim Jagat Patim Sunandananda Prabhala Ahaya Divi Swaparshadagrahe parisevitum vibhum.
Swaparshadagrahe parisevitum vibhum. Dadasha tatra kile sattvatam patim. Shriya patim yagya patim jagat patim. Sunanda nanda prabalari hanadivi. Swaparshadagrahe pravisevitam vibhum.
Dadasha tatra kila sattvatam patim.
Dadasha tatra kile sattvatam patim.
Shriya patim yagya patim jagat patim.
Shriya patim yagya patim jagat patim.
Sunananda
Sunananda pralabalarhanadivi.
Swaparshadagrahe parisevitam vibhum.
Swaparshadagrahe pravisevitam vibhum.
Dadasha tatra kila sattvatam patim.
Dadasha tatra kile sattvatam patim.
Shriya patim yagya patim jagat patim.
Sunandananda prabhalarhanadivi. Swaparshadagrahe pravisevitam vibhum.
Dadasha Brahmaso Tatra there in Vaikuntha. Akhila in time. Sattvatam of the great devotees. Patim the Lord. Shriya of the goddess of fortune. Patim the Lord. Yagya of sacrifice. Patim the Lord. Jagat of the universe. Patim of the Lord. Sunanda Sunanda. Nanda Nanda. Prabala Prabala. Ahana Ahana. Adivi by them. Swaparshada own associates. Agrai by the foremost. Parisevitam being served in transcendental love. Vibhum the great Almighty. Translation. Lord Brahma saw in the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, and who is served by foremost servitors like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabhala, Ahana, his immediate associates. Responsively, please. Lord Brahma saw in the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, who is served by the foremost servitors, like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabhala and Ahana, his immediate associates. Purport. When we speak of a king, it is naturally understood that the king is accompanied by his confidential associates, like his secretary, private secretary, aide-de-camp, ministers and advisors. So also when we see the Lord, we see him with his different energies, associates, confidential servitors, etc. So the Supreme Lord, who is the leader of all living entities, the Lord of all devotee sects, the Lord of all opulences, the Lord of sacrifices and the enjoyer of everything in his creation, is not only the Supreme Person, but is always surrounded by his immediate associates, all engaged in their loving transcendental service to him. And there's an interesting verse in the 4th chapter, which is quite similar to this, but I'm struggling to find it. Let me just see if I can find it. It's very, very similar to this. But this thing decided not to cooperate, so I wrote all my notes down on the computer, but didn't copy it across. So I'm a little bit. I thought it was 4:25 or something. It's a very similar verse to this, but I just can't remember the number of it. Yeah, so the point that's being made in this verse, or one of the points that's being made in this verse, and also we see in the 4th chapter, is how the Lord, he's the master of so many different personalities, and this is here it is verse 20. It says Sriyapati, Yagapati, Prajapati, Diyapati, Lokapati, Dharapati, Patigatis Chandaka, Vishni Sattvatam, Prasidatam, Me Bhagavan Satim Pati. So you see it's the same sort of similar, even similar meter in this verse where it's saying, it says Sattvatam, so he's the Lord of all the devotees. Then Sriyapatim, he's the Lord of the goddess of fortune. Yagavatim, he's the Lord of sacrifice. Jagapatim, he's the Lord of the universe. So in text 20 it's saying Sriyapatim, he's the Lord of the goddess of fortune. Yagavatim, Prajapatim, he's the Lord of all the devotees. Diyapatim, Diya of intelligence. Lokapati, he's the Lord of the all the planets. Then Dharapati, he's the Lord of the earth. Pati Gatis, and then Gatis meaning destination, he's the Lord of all destinations, so wherever you might go, the Lord is there. And the point being with these types of verses is that to help us, to inspire us to, in all circumstances, to remember Krishna. Because we see that Krishna, there's an interesting description given in the 6th chapter of the Gita. That because in the Gita there's a few sections there in the Gita, but towards the last half of the chapter, in the 6th chapter, towards the last half of the 6th chapter, it's talking about yogis, and it's mentioning that different qualities of a yogi and separating the yogis from ordinary personalities, and then it's describing how that one who sees Krishna in all circumstances, then for him the Lord is never lost, and neither, and it goes on to mention how that this devotee is always in me, and I always am in them. So by developing this mentality or this consciousness of seeing Krishna everywhere, seeing Krishna as the Lord and Master of everything, the entire creation, as we're seeing in this verse in the 4th chapter, how he's the Lord of the earth, he's the Lord of the universe, he's the Lord of all the living entities, he's the Lord of all directions. It's a very similar point that's being made here in this verse. That Sukadeva Goswami is talking about how he saw the Lord, who is the Lord of the entire devoted community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifice, the Lord of the universe, and he's served by the foremost of personalities. So seeing him as being the Lord of everything, and it's very interesting, this section. I think it's from about the 8th verse through to the 18th verse or something like that. Because what we see earlier on is Brahma, he performed austerities. He heard the divine voice or the divine sound vibration instructing him to perform tapasya. He started to perform tapasya, and then Krishna became pleased with his tapasya. So much so that he revealed his abode. And not only did he reveal his abode, but he revealed himself, the goddess of fortune, and all his associates. And so this is indicating the greatness of Lord Brahma, because by his tapasya, that he was able to see Krishna directly. Or, in this case, the Lord Narayan, he saw him directly. And he saw him, but he wasn't just on his own. He wasn't just like, in isolation from the rest of creation. No, he saw his abode. He saw his consort. And he saw all his beautiful associates. And it's just like, an interesting aspect of deity worship. We were just having a conversation about this yesterday. Because we're working on an online course for temple worship, and we were talking about the different mantras you chant, and the worship structured in a certain way is like in the beginning you have what is called the manasa section of the worship. In the middle you have the bhakti section, which is all the external worship, and then you have the concluding activities. So in the manasa section of the worship, you chant various mantras to bring a consciousness or bring a vision into your consciousness. And this starts by meditating on the Dharma, what the Dharma looks like, and so there's a really nice verse describing Navadvip Dharma, for instance, and it's described how it's like the back of a gigantic turtle, and you look at the back of a gigantic turtle and you see all those kind of divisions, it almost got all these like plates all over its back. That's just like Navadvip. There's all these islands. If you go up and have a look from Navadvip from above, you can see there's all these like tributaries of the Ganga and the Jalangi, and that they're breaking the whole area into small islands. And so, Navadvip is like that. It's just like the back of a gigantic turtle, and it's describing all the palaces there, and it's describing how the devotees perform kirtan in all these different places. So the idea is to bring this vision into your consciousness. And we see there's a really nice description of this kind of activity in the 10th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, where once there was this Brahmana who lived on the bank of the Godavari in a place called Prastinapur. And he heard it because he used to go and attend the Bhagavatam class every day. So he heard in this class that one, if one has no material means, then you can worship the Lord in meditation. So he decided that that's what he was going to do, because he was very poor, he had no money, he didn't even have a house. And so he would sit down on the bank of the Godavari, he'd bathe, and he'd take his bath first, and then he'd sit down on the bank of the Godavari, and then he'd meditate upon the Lord's Dharma. And then he'd fix that vision in his mind. And with Vrindavan Dharma, there's so many beautiful, what they call Vrindavan Dhyan mantras. I can't remember one right now, but there's one we have in the deity worship book, which is fairly simple. But there's many much more elaborate Vrindavan Dhyan mantras, which is very beautiful and help us to fix this vision of the Dharma in our mind. And if you fix this in your mind, it's the same as being there. And this is one of the points of these meditations, these mantras, is there's no difference between the external meditation and the physical presence. The internal meditation and the physical presence. If you're able to fix this in your mind without any disturbance, then the Dharma is present there. So in the same way, when you meditate, because the next thing you do is you fix the vision of the Dharma in your consciousness, then you meditate upon the Lord, and you fix His form in your consciousness. And there's many wonderful pastimes where you see, for instance, there's a really interesting story where the Sanatana Goswami was meditating one time. And he was seeing, he was so absorbed in meditation, he was actually there in the pastime. It's not like it was something, just a little story, and he was thinking of a nice story and stuff. No, he was actually, because his meditation was so fixed and deep, he was physically there. And like this one particular story I can think of, he was watching Radha and Krishna, and they were engaged in their various pastimes. So Krishna was trying to pick some fruit from the tree. And he called Radha over and said, I can't pull it down, please come and help me. So Radha only came and helped me, and she started to pull down the tree also. And Krishna went home. And Radha only was holding on the tree, and she got pulled up in the air. And so Sanatana Goswami started to laugh. And just at that point, Brajvasi was going past, but this Brajvasi had some physical deformities. And so this Brajvasi thought that Sanatana Goswami was laughing at him. And so Sanatana Goswami's meditation was broken because of that. And anyway, so the story goes that he actually was very disturbed because the meditation broke and he couldn't enter back into that meditation. He tried and tried and he couldn't enter back into it because of this supposed Vaishnava upbringing. So he eventually found out what had happened, and he went and he apologized, offering obeisance to this Vaishnava. He was able to enter back again into the pastime. So it's like when we're meditating in deity worship, it's very important to try and fix the meditation, because Sanatana Goswami, possibly from this experience, he mentions that it's an offense to break the meditation. So when you're meditating, it's just like, to trying to meditate, on a busy street corner or in a subway train or something like that would be very, very difficult. You wouldn't be able to fix your mind. So it's ideally we have a situation where you can sit down and just focus on the Dharma, focus on the deity, and then you become sort of fixed in this consciousness. And then what happens, the next step is you actually worship the deity in the mind. And the nice thing about worshiping the deity in the mind is you can offer all types of wonderful arrangements. Okay, like when you're doing the external worship, and sometimes if you don't have any facility, you can simply just have an answering cup and water, and you can offer the whole thing with mantras and water, meditating on the item being present. But in the meditation, you can meditate on you might be bathing Lord's feet, because it starts off asana swaga pada. The first thing you do is you bathe after offering the seat. You offer a beautiful seat covered with silk cloths and got jewels and gold and the whole thing. Very, very beautiful meditation. And then when you're bathing his feet, Prabhupada described this to Jamuna one time, that he was talking about Manasa Puja. He said you can meditate, you're collecting water from the Jamuna. And Jamuna had never been to India. He said, I don't know what the Jamuna looks like, so Prabhupada described the Jamuna. And he said, it's very beautiful, and it's glistening water, and he said, you can meditate, you're collecting with gold pitchers, and they've got jewels in and things like that. So Prabhupada also described the whole process of meditation, so that in your meditation you can be offering the most opulent worship, even though externally you may only have simple things. You might just have a pot of water and a spoon, and just doing Balaji and some mantras. But the thing is, when the meditation is focused and you absorb the worship, you get the benefit of offering all these opulent things, even though you don't have this opulence. So this is the nature of bhakti, and this is the nature of this manasa. And so the idea here is to become absorbed in this understanding that Krishna is the Lord of everything. And then we get that benefit, we get that experience, not just the benefit, we get the experience of how Krishna is the Lord of everything. And then from that, we become so absorbed in Krishna consciousness that we become fixed in our consciousness on Krishna. And then Krishna describes, as I was mentioning in the 6th chapter of the Gita, how that person is in me and I am also in them. So the connection between Krishna and devotee becomes very solid. And this is, I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think this is in the stage of Bhava. I don't understand these sort of terms so kind of richly, but this is the idea. And Srila Prabhupada, he discusses also that, because he talks about this verse. Actually, there's a class where he gives on this verse in Tokyo. Banuswami was there, and he talks about the associates, and he mentions how we can also become an associate like these personalities, like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabhala, and he mentions just like you can become the Prime Minister, you can become the President. And we all have that opportunity. Anyone here could become the Prime Minister. As long as you're an Australian citizen, you can become the Prime Minister of Australia. You just have to, as long as you're qualified, you can become the Prime Minister of Australia. And so it's the same here. As long as it talks about Nanda, Sunanda, Prabhala, Ahara, and it's unfortunate this thing is not cooperating, because I did a bit of research last night, and these two personalities, Nanda and Sunanda, because if we go back to, let me see, verse 12, it mentions here, verse 11, sorry. It mentions Shama Bata Sata Patralochna. It talks about how the the associates, it says, the inhabitants of Vaikuntha planets are all described as having glowing sky bluish complexion. Now, who's that like? Krishna. Right, so the residents of Vaikuntha, they have a particular type of liberation. Does anyone know what that liberation is called? Or this one we're talking about here in particular? Sarupya. Yeah, they have the same bodily form as Krishna, which is described in verse 12. It mentions, Prabhupada talks about that in the purpose, that there are some inhabitants who have attained the liberation of Sarupya or possessing bodily features like those of the personal Godhead. So, Nanda and Sunanda, who are being described in this verse, and of course Pravala and Ahara, they're very, very similar in appearance to Krishna. And actually we see in many different places when Krishna appeared, they also appeared. When Daksha was doing his sacrifice, and he, after he had his head chopped off and the head of a goat put on, and he it was a really interesting story about this bit of an old goat, and so he wound up with the head of a goat, and so then he realized the mistake he made, so he did the yajna properly, he invited David, he invited Lord Shiva, and Vishnu was pleased, so Vishnu came. And he came, and Nanda and Sunanda were also there. Also, when Prithu was doing his sacrifice, when they were doing the final oblations, Vishnu became satisfied and he appeared with Nanda and Sunanda. When Bali Maharaj was fighting with the Dev, when Vaman Dev appeared, and Bali Maharaj's soldiers, they wanted to attack Vamana Dev, so they all ran at Vamana Dev to kill him. But then Nanda and Sunanda, they picked up weapons, they started to smile, and they were just like, killing left, right, and centre. They were just, decimating them. Same thing when, Prithu, Daksha Yajna, when Dhruva was older, not as a child, after he was a king and he was getting ready to go back to Godhead, Nanda and Sunanda came to the spiritual world, and they said, the Lord has sent us to take you back home. So we see that these personalities, they're almost as good as the Lord himself, and they're acting as agents of the Lord. And Prabhupada makes the point when he speaks on the lecture on this class, that we also can have this opportunity of associating with the Lord like these personalities. We can't become God. This is one of the fallacies of the impersonalist philosophers, is they think, especially with the Mayavadis, their idea is I was giving a class the other day on the authenticity of deity worship and talking about like we see that like in India you'll see deity worship is quite common amongst different sampradayas, both Vaishnava and non-Vaishnava sampradayas. But in the non-Vaishnava sampradayas they have a different idea, is that eventually they become the deity. This anthropomorphism is called. They think that by the process of worship, by doing their austerities, that eventually they become, like if you go to, I remember being at, I can't remember what year it was, I think it was 96, or even later, in the early 2000s. I went to the Kumbh Mela in Prayag. If you ever get the experience to go to Kumbh Mela, I really encourage you. It's such an eye-opening experience. It's pretty, it's a little bit austere, you've got to sleep on the ground and stuff like that, but Dita Bandhu made really, really nice arrangements. But then you go around and visit all these different camps. I saw so many amazing things there. And I remember going into the Mayavadi, they had a big tent there, these Mayavadis, and they had Radha Krishna deities, and they were worshipping Radha Krishna, very, very opulent, gorgeous worship. But then if you explore what their worship is, the conclusion of their worship, their idea is they become one with the deity. And there's so many amazing things you see. There was this whole, because it was like a city. I was like the morning Amavasya is the biggest day of the Kumbh Mela. There was more than 20 million people there, and for one day it was the biggest city in the world. And the really interesting thing is, the whole time of Kumbh Mela, went for about 18 days. The whole time there was not one single crime. Can you imagine that? And 20 million people, there's not one single crime. They're all there focused on this purpose of serving the Lord in one way or another. Because the idea they have is if you, because at the place where they do the Kumbh Mela Prayag is the Allahabad, is the confluence of three rivers. There's the Ganga, the Jamuna, which you can see, and you can actually see the confluence, so you can see the different colours of the water. And the Saraswati is supposed to come from underneath. She's booked or hidden. And if you bathe in the Sangam at the right time on that day, it was about 3:30 in the morning. It was really cold. But if you bathe in the sun at that time, it's considered you'll go back to Godhead, or in persons that achieve liberation. So there's like a lot of people there doing that with this idea of achieving liberation. But of course, for the devotees, like we were there with a completely different idea. What was going on from the devotee side, we were doing Harinam practically all day, every day, and distributing huge quantities of prasadam. So I was there helping with the prasadam distribution. It was massive. And so different motive. But the idea, as I was getting to, actually I was going to talk a little bit about some of the things I saw. So I went into the Mayavadi camp, and I saw they had Radha Krishna deities, but then there are also other ones that are smoking chillums and stuff like that. And I won't describe some of these theories, they're pretty weird what they're doing. But at least from our perspective, walking around naked and all that sort of stuff. But then you see these guys that they had these like bed of thorns. They've got these plants in India that the camels like to eat. And Prabhupada describes this, how they eat because these thorny plants have got really small little leaves, but they're really succulent. And so the camels like them and they eat those. But what happens is they cut up their blood, cut up their lips, and they get the blood, and they think this is the taste of the plant, so they're getting this, what they think is a nice taste in the mouth. And Prabhupada describes this as, what does he say? He used hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. The camels are like can you remember? Oh, I forgot what name he said. Huh?
It's somewhere in the farm cabin.
Yeah, in the drawers locked.
Compared to sex life?
Yeah, thank you, Master Stress. It's compared to sex life because you're burning up your own blood when you're engaged in sex life and you think it's such a nice taste. And he compares this to being like the camels. So yeah, these guys, they get these thorns and they twist them all into this like big pillow. And they lie on it. And it's like, and then people, they have their little begging thing out the front, their gumption down there, and people come throw money for them because they're performing these hysterics. And I think I mentioned this one time before. I saw this other guy, right, and he was performing this tapasya, right. He had he was dressed like Hanuman, right, with a Hanuman mask, all this sort of stuff, and had all the tacky Indian sort of, sequin clothing and stuff like that. He had his arm up in the air, and he had this sword straight through his arm. And then, there's blood dripping down and all this sort of stuff, and people are throwing money. And I came and had a close look at it. I could actually see. It reminded me. I don't know if any of you ever went to I grew up in Melbourne, so they used to have the Melbourne show. Those of you from Brisbane got the Echo, stuff like that. And I remember because in the day when I went, the show bags were all free. You probably remember that, right? I saw all these free show bags, right? You didn't have to pay for anything. Now they cost so much money. But you used to get all these little things in there. So one thing I remember we got one time was it was like this band that had like a knife thing sticking out either side. You put it on your head, and you run around like you got a sword through your head. So this is what this guy had done. He had this thing on his arm. It was like you could see it was actually just a plastic thing, and he had this fake sword stuck on his arm, and he painted blood down there, and people were throwing money because they didn't look closely. So one of the things I realized when I attended this Kumbh Mela was there's so many people out there trying to cheat others, and there's so many people who are willing to be cheated. And that's the process. That's like why this is really important. This description that's going on here, because this is an authorized description of the kingdom of God. It's an authorized description of the Supreme Personality of God and his associates. So if you don't want to be cheated in this world, you need to accept guidance, you need to accept knowledge from an authorized source. And this is the point that's being made throughout the scriptures we see in the 4th chapter of the Gita. Krishna says to Arjuna, he says, Tadvidi Pranipatene Pranipashena Sevi Upadekshati Gana Jnananas Tattvadashana. So this last line, very important, this Jnananas Tattvadashana. Because Tattvadashi means he's seeing the truth. Jnananas, he can give you knowledge. So, you approach the self-realized person. Self-realized means someone who's seeing the truth, the absolute truth. Not just, understanding the truth of how microphones made. I can tell you that. I can tell you exactly how the thing works. But that doesn't mean I'm realized. It just means I pull one of these things apart and know what's inside. But someone who actually understands the absolute truth can tell you what this world is all about, how the world functions, can also reveal. There's in deity worship, when you do, before you go on the altar, you generally mentor, before you start worship, you do what they call Buddha Shuddhi. So in different Vaishnava sects, Buddha Shuddhi is very, very complicated, but in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it's quite simplified. Although some of our acharyas might think, oh, it's so complicated, why so many mantras? You think this is complicated, you should see what the Sri Vaishnavas do. It's very complicated. But there's one mantra we chant, Om Tat Vishnu Paramambara Pashanti Sura Divi Chacha. That basically, this mantra is saying that just as the one part of the verse is saying, just as the wise and learned Brahmanas, they can see the Lord's abode, because they have the Paramam, they can see the Lord's abode, they can also reveal this to you, because they have the vision. So if you don't see something, you don't understand something, like if I was to ask one of you who don't know anything about microphones, what's inside of here, you couldn't tell me. But I can tell you because I know what's inside of there. Simply, it's just there's a capsule up there which got coils on it, and there's nothing in there. Actually, there's just wires going through it. And the way it works through phasing and stuff. So if you speak behind, no one's going to hear. They've got little sort of vents at the back to phase the sound, put it out of phase so you can still cancel them out. So it's a simple thing. So it's the same with the spiritual world. Because these wise and learned Brahmanas, because they're seeing that, because they're Tattvadashis, they've realized it, then they can reveal that to us. So in the same way, Prabhupada makes this point in regard to this section here, this passage of verses here, where Brahma is seeing the Lord's abode, seeing Vaikuntha, that you can't understand it through imagination. You can't make up your own idea of what the spiritual world is like. No, you have to hear it from a self-realized person. You have to hear it from someone who's understood, who's seen. And then you will understand. It's the only way you can understand. It's not something that's open to self-interpretation, or not something, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam, all these books, they're not do-it-yourself manuals. You can just read this book and understand. It's not like that. You need to actually understand the knowledge through someone who's realized. And this is why, I mentioned this last time I gave a class, this is why the Guru Parampara is so important. That we receive the fruit of this is mentioned in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, this phalam, the fruit of bhakti, from the unbroken chain of Guru and disciple. And the Guru gives to his disciple, the disciple becomes a Guru, he gives to his disciple, etc. It goes on like that. And you receive it like that. And then the knowledge is intact. And Prabhupada often uses the example of a mango tree. It's just like, if a mango falls from the top of the tree on the ground, a ripe mango falls on the ground, what happens? It goes splat and just spreads all over the place. It's useless, you can't do anything with it. But if someone's up in the tree and they pick the fruit, they pass it down to someone else, they pass it down to someone else, through the whole chain, and very carefully pass it down, then you get the fruit intact, you're going to go to Krishna. And it's interesting, the reverse is also there. We can get this knowledge from Krishna through this unbroken chain. If we want to offer something to Krishna, the system that Srila Prabhupada gave us was we offer to our Guru, who then offers to his Guru, who then offers to his Guru, who then offers to his Guru, all the way back, who offers it to Lord Chaitanya, who then offers it to Radharani, who then offers it to Krishna. So either way, to receive from Krishna, we receive through the civic succession, and to offer to Krishna, we offer through the civic succession. And then it's complete. Prabhupada uses this term in a letter. He says, by offering through the civic succession, then it becomes complete. So this is the way to receive knowledge, and this is the way to serve the Lord. We receive knowledge through the civic succession, we receive the Lord through this procession. That's why you see when we offer Aarti on Govinda's altar, we have the prominent acharyas of our Gaudiya Vaishnava, this is the procession. And then also we have our Guru's picture there. And we offer our Guru, who offers to his Guru, who offers to his Guru, and the way to Krishna. So, yeah. I think that's about all I've got to say on this. Any comments or questions at all? Krishna Mataji.
Speaking a little bit to the Kumbh Mela, Prabhupada gave a lecture in 1966 in New York on 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada in that lecture, Prabhupada said that, and in the Kumbh Mela, he said that you can see yogis who are 700 years old, but they appear like 25-year-old boys.
Yeah. I personally, I didn't see anyone that I knew of that, but they have quite a hierarchy there in the Kumbh Mela where certain people will get to bathe first, and it's rigidly enforced by the police, not the police, sorry, the military, because the whole thing is run by the militaries. It's the whole thing set up just like a military camp. They've got all these like floating bridges and stuff like that because pilgrims are coming from all over India. And so they rigidly enforce the order of bathing, especially for the bathing on the morning of Amavasya. And there's people coming down riding on elephants and all sorts of stuff. And I heard that one of these guys, one of these yogis who came down with the elephant was very, very old. I didn't see him myself, but I was told they were very old. And I can't remember the name they have. They have all these different groups that come down. And generally the Naga Babas are amongst the first ones that they get a priority. And so there's a real pecking order of who bathes. But yeah, one of those persons was reported to be several hundred years old. And the way they do that, according to what I've read in the scriptures, is because our life is measured in breaths. Like the materialistic ideas is measured in days, minutes, years or whatever, but in seconds. But according to the Vedic information, is measured in breaths. So what these yogis are able to do is they slow the breathing process right down, and really slow it down, so they can live for a long, long time. It's quite interesting. Anything else at all? Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi.